Have you ever stood up from a chair, taken those first few steps, and felt your hips reminding you that time is moving a little faster than it used to? That tiny stiffness, that little pinch, that slow, heavy feeling, almost like your hips need a moment to wake up. Most people brush it off, but here's something most never hear. Those small signals are actually your body quietly asking for help. And if you give your hips the right kind of help, just a few minutes a day, you can rebuild strength, restore mobility, and stay active and powerful well into your 70s, 80s, and even 90s. Hip pain and weakness don't show up overnight. They creep in slowly. A little tightness here, a little instability there, and suddenly walking long distances feels harder. Getting out of a car requires more effort. And stairs? They start feeling like a workout of their own. But this is the part one want you to hear clearly. Your hips are not done. They're not too old. They're not worn out. They're simply undertrained. And once you start giving them the right movements, they can heal, strengthen, and transform far faster than most people realize. Today, I'm giving you the only 5 exercises your hips truly need. Not a long list, not a complicated routine, just 5. 5 movements backed by biomechanics, proven with real-world seniors, and designed to keep your hips strong enough that you can walk confidently, move freely, and stay independent all the way to 90 and beyond. And the best part? You can perform these exercises at home, with no equipment, and in just minutes a day. So take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and stay with me. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your hips feel the way they do, why most people train them incorrectly, and how these 5 simple exercises can genuinely rebuild your strength and mobility from the inside out. The full 3,000-word continuous script starts here. No headings, no bullets, smooth flow. Have you ever noticed how the hips control almost everything about the way you move? When they're strong, your whole body feels stable. Your back feels supported, your knees feel lighter, and your balance feels solid. But when the hips weaken, even just a little, you feel it everywhere. Suddenly standing from the bed takes more effort than it should. Suddenly you realize you're leaning on one side more. Or maybe you catch yourself avoiding long walks because your hips start to ache halfway through. These aren't signs of aging in the way most people think. They're signs of hip deconditioning, and the amazing thing is that the human hip can recover at nearly any age as long as you give it movement, blood flow, and the right kind of muscular activation. The problem is that most of us grew up believing hips become painful or stiff purely because of age. People say things like, "My joints are getting old," or "This is just how it is after 60. But research and real-life training experience tell a different story. When I work with older adults, what I see is that the hips don't deteriorate because of age. They deteriorate because of inactivity, muscle imbalance, and years of compensations. When you give the hips targeted strengthening, circulation, glide, and gentle stretching, they respond incredibly fast. Some people see improvements within days. Others feel a difference within the first session. And what I'm about to share with you today is the exact routine I've used on people who were struggling to walk without discomfort, people who had lost strength due to long desk jobs, people who had undergone surgeries, and people who wanted to stay active for decades. The first thing we need to understand is that the hip joint is surrounded by layers of muscles, some big and powerful, others small and deep. The big ones, like the glutes and hip flexors, are often overworked and tight. The smaller stabilizing muscles, especially the gluteus medius, deep rotators, and the muscles around the pelvis, are often weak and undertrained. This imbalance creates stiffness, pinching, clicking, instability, and even radiating pain down the leg. When you restore these muscles to their natural balance, everything begins to work the way it's supposed to. Walking becomes smoother. Standing becomes easier. And that fragile feeling in the hips starts to disappear. That's why the 5 exercises I'm about to take you through are not random. They were chosen because they address the exact 5 categories your hips need: stability, mobility, glute strength, hip flexor function, and pelvic alignment. When you train all 5, your hips stop fighting against your movements and start supporting them. And once your hips support your movements, everything else in your life becomes easier. Climbing stairs, bending down, getting up from the floor, walking longer distances, even sleeping more comfortably. Before we get into the exercises, I want you to prepare your mind for something important. You don't need to be fast. You don't need to be super flexible. You don't need perfect form on day one. All you need is consistency. You could do these 5 exercises slowly, gently, and mindfully, and you would still get results. But the magic happens when you do them every day or at least a few times a week with focus and intention. Remember, strength comes from repetition, not from perfection. Now let's talk about the first exercise, one of the simplest but most powerful movements for hip mobility. You'll start seated or lying down, whichever feels comfortable, and you'll slowly guide your hip through a controlled rotation. This is something most people rarely do, yet it's one of the most important ways to keep the hip joint lubricated and healthy. Think of it like oiling a hinge. When you rotate the hip, you're sending blood flow deep into the joint capsule, loosening the muscles that wrap around the ball and socket, and improving the glide of the tissues that often cause stiffness. Many people tell me that within the first few seconds of doing this, they feel parts of their hip that they hadn't felt in years. As you slowly rotate the hip outward and inward, focus on feeling the movement instead of forcing it. You might feel tightness on one side. You might feel more control on the other. That's completely normal. The goal here is to awaken the deep rotator muscles and improve the overall range of motion. When the hip rotates better, walking becomes smoother, and the entire hip complex becomes more resilient. Now, once we've awakened the hip with this rotation exercise, we move into the second exercise, which is designed for pure glute activation. Strong glutes are one of the biggest keys to staying mobile and independent as you age. When your glutes are strong, your hips stay aligned, your pelvis stays stable, and your lower back stays protected. A lot of people think their hip pain comes from the hip itself, but in many cases, it's actually coming from dormant or weak glutes. This exercise trains your glutes to fire again. You'll lie on your back, plant your feet, and slowly lift your hips into a gentle bridge. The key is not to lift high, but to lift with control. As you rise, squeeze your glutes softly, not with tension, but with intention. Hold the top for a couple of seconds and then slowly lower. This movement strengthens the posterior chain, improves blood flow, and even helps release tight hip flexors through reciprocal activation. People often say they feel the front of their hip opening while the back of their hip strengthens, and that's exactly the perfect combination. The third exercise targets one of the most important muscles you've probably never heard of but absolutely need, the gluteus medius. This muscle sits on the side of your hip and controls balance, gait, and stability. Weakness in this muscle causes wobbling when you walk, makes you more likely to shuffle or sway, and contributes to hip, knee, and even lower back pain. When this muscle is strong, your entire body feels more stable, and your walking pattern becomes smoother almost immediately. To train it, you'll lie on your side and perform a slow, controlled lateral leg raise. But you're not just lifting your leg. You're lifting with the side of your hip. This movement strengthens the exact muscle responsible for keeping your pelvis level when you walk. The slower you do it, the better it works. If you feel burning on the side of your hip after just a few reps, that's a good sign. It means you're finally activating a muscle that has been asleep for years. Now we move to the fourth exercise, and this one is all about unlocking the hip flexors. These muscles get tight when we sit too long. They become shortened, cranky, and stubborn. They pull the pelvis forward, strain the lower back, and make your hips feel locked or stiff. But when you stretch them correctly, not aggressively, not forcefully, but slowly and gently, you can restore a huge amount of mobility and comfort to the entire hip structure. This exercise involves a gentle half-kneeling stretch or a standing variation if kneeling isn't comfortable. The key here is not to push your hips forward hard. That's a mistake many people make. Instead, you want to tuck your pelvis slightly, keep your core lightly engaged, and then ease forward just enough to feel a comfortable stretch. When done correctly, you feel the tension melt away through the front of your hip and even into your thigh. And now we reach the fifth exercise, the one that brings everything together. This movement focuses on hip stability, coordinated control, and functional strength. It mimics real-life movements like stepping, walking, and shifting your weight. This could be a controlled step-back movement, a gentle hip hinge, or a supported single-leg balance exercise depending on your comfort level. What matters is that this exercise teaches your hips to support your body the way they were naturally designed to. When you perform it regularly, you improve your balance, your posture, and your confidence moving throughout your day. By the time you finish these 5 exercises, you've hit mobility, flexibility, strength, rotation, and stability, the entire blueprint of a healthy hip. And here's where the real transformation happens. When you do these movements consistently, even for just 5 or 10 minutes a day, you're training your body to stay mobile and strong for decades to come. Imagine being 80 or 90 and still walking with confidence. Imagine getting out of a chair without using your hands. Imagine enjoying long walks, playing with grandkids, or simply moving without pain or stiffness. All of that becomes possible when your hips are strong. And the reason these exercises work so well is because they restore balance. Most people have tight hip flexors, weak glutes, stiff rotators, and underused stabilizers. This creates a chain reaction that leads to pain. But when you correct these imbalances, your hips start to feel younger, freer, and more powerful. I've seen seniors who could barely move without discomfort regain their mobility in just a few weeks. Some regain the ability to climb stairs comfortably. Others regain strength they thought was gone forever. The most important thing to remember is that aging doesn't mean losing strength. It means using your body differently and smarter. Your hips are not a worn-out joint. They're a responsive, adaptable system. When you feed them movement, they reward you with strength. When you give them consistency, they reward you with stability. And when you give them proper training, they reward you with a level of independence that many people only dream of having later in life. Movement is medicine, but the right movement is transformation. And these 5 exercises are the right movement. They're simple, gentle, powerful, and perfectly suited for anyone wanting to stay active long into the later decades of life. So the next time you stand up and feel a little stiffness, don't ignore it. Don't accept it as aging. See it as a reminder that your hips need you just as much as you need them. And when you show up for your body shows up for you. Keep moving, stay consistent, and trust that your hips are capable of much more than you think. And if you want more videos that help you stay strong, independent, and pain-free as you age, make sure to subscribe and keep learning with me. Your best years of movement are not behind you. They're ahead of you as long as you take care of your hips today.